Hello everyone, welcome to the in-depth review for Naga. I'm sorry it's a bit late. Yesterday was a stream and I also did my summons and everything. As for the summon session, it's probably going to drop today. I have more or less everything ready. It depends on whether or not YouTube fixes its shit in time, but I suppose we'll see. Now, back to Naga. Time to see just how well she handles things. So, her breath is really the main thing that makes her work. A lot of things that she struggles with comes down to her stats, and she comes down to the same problems female Grima has, she still has the problems, where, you know, she's good at everything, which makes her bad at everything, because as a result, her points are too spread for her to really fit a role. The thing is, Naga has a way to go around this, and first off, her C skill allows you to combo into her weapon, allowing you to run dragon effective weapons, even if, you know, you don't have any dragon effective weapons in your main team to speak of. So it allows you to make them effective against dragon. That C skill is honestly a bit busted in a way, and not in the right way. I do think dragons are strong. They used to be actually part of the main meta of this game. Legendary Tiki, Halloween Myrrh comes to mind. But the thing is, that's a meta that's dead for like the past 2-3 months, because I'm gonna be honest with you, armored dragons are nowhere near as threatening as some other units that have been released or that have, you know, received access to certain toys. Think, for example, Legendary Azura. Think, for example, Legendary Alm. Think, for example, Ophelia. So, you know, or even a Versa. You can actually see a Versa now in high tier arena, which is extremely annoying to deal with. So, yeah, being able to make effective against dragon a thing on any unit just feels like a buff to the unit that doesn't need the buff, aka, you know, Legendary Alm, for example, that can now have dragon effective. So one of his best counter, which was Legendary Tiki, because she completely shuts down specials against Alm, which actually gives her a fighting chance, not to mention have a fantastic amount of speed to just plug the second hit. Well, Alm can now have the dragon effective effect to effectively fuck up Tiki. That's not exactly something I like, considering Alm already had next to no counter to begin with, and having some very, very hard to get counter was already annoying in itself, but the fact that those very annoying to get counters are now not as effective anymore is kind of insulting, to say the least. So, yeah, I don't feel too good about this, but it does help Naga quite a bit. Now, like I said, Divine Breath is the cornerstone that makes her work as a unit. Because Grima's main problem is that since her stats are so spread, she's very shit at low merges, but becomes a lot more decent at high merges. So, you'd expect Naga, a character that does not have the benefit of being on a legendary banner for like multiple months in a row, to be worse. You can be far further from the truth. Because the thing is, Divine Breath is just that good. Divine Breath allows you to get upward to 9 attack, speed, def, and res, which is literally twice what you get from merges, and then some. This actually allows you to make your stat that looks fairly unappealing to begin with a lot more threatening. Expect only 2 people to support you though, because that's a lot more consistent. 3 people can happen, but it's a lot harder to pull off. Still, say you have 2 people around you, you're 30, 36, 33, 26. becomes, because of course her weapon also gives her 3 attack, which is really good in her case because her attack is kind of low. I'm going to count the weapon, but this actually pushes her attack to 55 unbuffed, 42 speed, 39 depth, and 32 res. To put it in perspective just how good her stat becomes because of it, her stats are literally beating Legendary Tiki in everything but HP. With just 2 people with effective against Dragon. And Legendary Tiki has an insanely good stat line for a just generalist that can do anything, basically. So that gives you an idea. Of course, she does not get access to Special Fighter, but that breath really makes up for a lot of problems that she would have otherwise. And the best part is she gets even better as you add merges to her. So, yeah. The one thing, however, is that Tiki gets DC in her weapon. Naga, well, doesn't. So you have to use your A skill for DC if you really want to use her at maximum value. Which, to some extent, can be a problem. It's definitely worth mentioning because it does end up hurting her to some extent. But, on high merges with DC, I'd say she can actually outdo Legendary Tiki to some extent, because bow units are way less common than armor killers. So that means that the weakness Tiki has, Naga has less of a weakness. Although, because of her own presence with Divine Fang, if you're dealing with another person using Naga, this could change, because of course, if they have effective against Dragon, you have more problem, because both Tiki and her have to struggle against those said units. Still, overall, fairly fantastic unit. And a lot of people kind of just wrote her off the second they saw her stats, and can't say I'm too surprised. Her stat line is deceptive. Moving on to comparison, as you know, there's not much... there's actually no other blue flying dragon, so I just compared with other colors. Just to give you an idea, Grima is just worse in bulk, outside of HP to some extent. No, actually, she doesn't have more attack because of Naga's weapon. Has less speed, so basically she's just worse at everything but HP. Of course, she has the advantage of being colorless, but that doesn't help nearly as much as you'd think. Yes, of course it does help. But the fact that Naga, on top of having just straight up better stat at base, just gets to have a weapon that gives her 6 across the board, kind of more or less makes up for it anyway. Like, even if you're at an advantage, you will obliterate them. If you're at a neutral combat, you won't really struggle. You'll do definitely better than Grima. And if you're dealing with greens, which that is obviously going to be a problem, then that's a bit more tricky. However, most of the threatening unit in AR, which is where you'll mostly use Naga in, are blue. Because Reinhardt, Ophelia, and of course Alm is always going to be a problem, but that is nothing new and is always going to be a problem regardless of what unit you're going to be using. Even if you have a TA Raven Tome, the guy can just have Cancel Affinity and suddenly your strategy is dead. If you have Bowbreaker, maybe he just runs no follow-up, and then Bowbreaker, a skill exclusively made, tailor-made to deal with colorless fucking bow units, do nothing against Alm. Except give you a follow-up, but who cares? Actually, no, it doesn't even give you the follow-up, because no follow-up blocks it. It is about as stupid as you'd think. So it's really hard to counter him, so Naga not being able to counter him consistently anyway, no surprise. You could actually use Iode's Shield, and on high merges, actually deal with Alm to some extent. Especially if you have the Fortress advantage, so I guess there's that to mention. As for Tiki, which obviously Tiki completely shits on Grima anyway, but still worth mentioning. Tiki actually retains some of her uniqueness because her weapon is still fairly unique to her. Her weapon basically gives her a breath effect, which flying dragons do not have access to whatsoever, so gives her a lot of things that flying dragons will just not be able to obtain in general. Definitely opens a lot of ways for her to just be built. But would I say that she's worse or better than Naga? I'd say it really comes down to this situation. Naga is technically going to be better more consistently, because the thing is with Naga, despite the fact that you'll be using her mostly defensively, I guess that should be something I mentioned, because you want to be keeping characters around her so she can maintain the dragon effectiveness on those units, or at least have them within 2 space so she can keep the bonus from the +3 to all stat if they're units such as Marth or other dragon killing units. So you actually stay in range of them. Going on the offensive is really difficult. You can go on the offensive, and sometimes it will work because you can just move the unit around where you're going to be attacking. But while I do say this, it's a lot harder to set up than being on the defensive. If you're on the defensive, you can just put her there, have unit around her, and then just wait for the enemy to come to you. This opens a lot more flexibility for you than being on the offensive. But she still has the option to go on the offensive if it's needed. Tiki, if she goes on the offensive, loses the advantage of her weapon, to a point where all her weapon does is 3 defense. That's kind of underwhelming, isn't it? So, of course, if you're just thinking of that in this way, Tiki will not be that interesting to use compared to Naga. So, Naga is better in more situations than Tiki is, but Tiki has a much stronger enemy phase to some extent because she could just run Aether or Ignis and be more consistently proccing the skill. So, yeah. Overall, I'd say Naga is the best of the 3, but, you know. Moving on to builds. So, this is the build I'm running on my own Naga. You can already pretty much guess how this summon went if I actually went out of my way to run Distant Counter on her. So I have some kind of experience when it comes down to whether or not it works or not. It works really well. This actually allows her to go for multiple fights, and considering she's going to be on heavy duty tanking duty, whatever, this is basically the best way to go about it. You could still use guard if you're afraid of specials, but most of the time, at least in AR, specials are already ready, or if they're not, they're almost ready, so, and they use stuff like Heavy Blade to make sure it gets ready, so guard becomes a bit inconsistent as a result. Mystic Boost is a lot better in that regard because, yeah, you'll take damage, but the 6 HP that you heal back is surprisingly helpful. In a lot of cases, I would just take a bow to the face, kill it in 1 hit because I have too much attack, and I end up being fine after 1 or 2 extra fight because my bulk is so high that I hardly take damage. Like in this case, Naga can have upward to 52 defense and 48 res. It's hard to actually dent you at that point. Hell, a lot of cases you're just going to take damage, but you're going to take like less than 10 damage, maybe 8 damage. But then you heal back for 6. So you only took really 2 damage. You get the idea. Mystic Boost is fantastic for her because she's an insanely good tank. It's hard to double her defense is high, her res is high, and if you feel like her res is not good enough, you can run distant defense. If you're afraid of bow units, you can run Iode's Shield. Obviously, you can't counter both at the same time, but her stats are already high enough that you can actually deal with mages to some extent, or if you don't think you're going to deal with bow units, you could just have even more and just make sure that you live that way. From mages, anyway. Overall, very solid unit. Aether is not always ideal. Like I said, distant death. Close death is also a good option, and Iode Shield is also a good option. But like I said, Aether, not always a good option, but you could just take it down to a damaging special, such as Bonfire, such as, I guess to some extent, Luna, if you're afraid. Or you're on lower merges, so you want to just have a bit more consistent damage output. That said, I genuinely think Bonfire will typically do you better. She is paired really well with Marth also, regular Marth of course. If you want her to be a bit more bulky, you can just pair her up with Legendary Marth, not Legendary Marth, Base Marth. And Base Marth will just give her 2 across the board because of his weapon. Corrin is also a good option if you want to just, you know, have a ton of stat just on her and not every one of your party. For the same reason, if you ally support them, and on top of that you keep your weapon, that's 5 across the board because of just the weapon, and 1 to 2 across the board because of ally support. This is pretty good because at the end of the day, sometimes you'll want to keep your distance from Naga because you're dealing with ranged units. So if you don't kill them in one round, what happens is they get danced, and because they get danced, they kill the unit that's literally behind Naga. In which case, a bond skill is not really as ideal. So that's why I actually put Distant Death 3 here. Attack Death Bond is still a fantastic option on her. But Attack Res Bond will definitely do better when it gets released in a few years, it seems. Still, Distant Death and Close Defense will typically be better in Aether raids. And Attack Death Bond, Attack Res Bond will be better in Arena. Because in Arena, you don't deal with ranged units nearly as much as you do in AR, thankfully. Still, like I said, if you think Aether is too much, considering she already has Mystic Boost, then yeah, just run something like Bonfire or Iceberg if Attack Res Bond is released one day, or something similar. Other than this, not much else I can say about this. It's really hard to improve her set, because at the end of the day, most of the things you could run, you can run them decently, but it doesn't. It kind of clashes with our playstyle. Like for example, when I was working on the build on stream, because obviously I work on this, I work on banner reviews on stream. At least the prep that I showcase on, you know, my channel, I work on this on Twitch. And someone was like, "How about Sturdy Impact?" But the thing is, if you stray too far from the units that gives you those basically drive spectrum of 3 across the board, you lose that. And because you lose that, Sturdy Impact becomes a lot less interesting, doesn't it? If you don't have this encounter, a stance skill will do you fine. Mirror Stance is actually fantastic for her because it evens up her def and to her res if you have res plus. And also provides you more damage, so you're a lot more consistent getting the kills. Obviously this encounter is better, but considering Mirror Stance is available on Sylvia, which is available in the 3-star pool, you know, it's a good budget option. As for the roster itself for this banner, this is very legendary heavy. 6 of those units are legendary / mythic units, so you know. Red is a fantastic unit, easily the best unit out of the red pool. Guntra is probably the second best. Very deceptive stat line. You'll see what I mean. I'll probably do a showcase of her on my Discord once it's the Earth season, so I can really showcase her at her max. She is absolutely insane. As for Erika, she's probably the weakest of the three, but she still gets, you know, Black Luna on a horse unit, which is obviously not bad. It's never going to be too bad. She can also use Gale Force fairly consistently. Rid is better overall at using Gale Force. And Rid's weapon is a lot stronger than Erika, but Erika still is fairly decent with Gale Force if you don't feel like using Lunar Brace. As for blue, Naga is, as I said, very good, and Legendary Tiki is still the best scoring Earth unit of this game, not to mention still a fantastic unit. As for Brave Hector, he's probably the worst of the three, not gonna lie. But he's still a fairly decent unit. Sadly, since he doesn't come with Distant Counter, the only thing he has for fodder is Bolt Fighter, so definitely a dud whenever you get him. Though, despite me saying this, I will easily say that blue has the best color, is the best color of this banner by far. Red is a close second, however. Now for the depressing part, green is absolutely terrible. Lin is by far the worst legendary unit of this game, surprisingly, literally no one. Fjorm is okay, but considering we're nearing the Summer unit rerun, and Summer Takumi is literally Fjorm, but colorless, aka not having a problem with Combat Triangle, it's really hard for me to suggest you summoning for her. Takumi is just better, dude. As for Lu, Lu is interesting. He can definitely pull some stuff that most other infantry green mage can't. That said, it requires you to pull Attack Plus. Because Attack Plus with AoEs is really good, and you can combo AoEs into Spectral Tome from Halloween Henry. If you want to know ideally what the type of set I would suggest for you to run on Lu, I would suggest you to watch my Beyond Darkness analysis, because I actually showcased a build with him. And I went more into details. So yeah, green is easily the worst color of this banner. And also, before someone asks, why is a number in green for the base stat total, while there's, you know, super boon on other characters, and they don't have anything on green for the base stat total? That's because 157, 152, or even 162, 167, and so on, if you can't reach those numbers, and then you get a merge on the unit, you go up a BST bin, because you actually get the extra stats added to your BST. So for example, let's take Lu. Lu gets to 157 BST with Attack Plus. Say Attack Plus. Well, actually, 156 BST, I guess, if you go Attack Plus and then, like, Def Minus, right? Because you do your first merge, your Def Minus is gone, so you get back the 4 points of stats you got from Def Minus. 156 plus 4 equals 160. So you get a BST bin. BST bin works as such that every bin is basically as big as 5 points. For example, 156 to 160 is a BST bin, then 161 to 165 is a BST bin. Wait, no. What the fuck? 155 to 159 is a BST bin, 160 to 164 is a BST bin, 165 to 169 is a BST bin, and so on. So, yeah. The fact that you get Attack Plus pushes you up a BST bin, which means he scores higher in Arena. And unlike Lin, and unlike Erika, the boon, the super boon for Lu is actually really good. Attack Plus is honestly the best super boon you can get. Well, the best boon in general you can get on Lu. Anyway, moving on. Duma is a wheelchair, just wait for a better Anima unit, if that's what your goal is. If you like Duma, that's fine, go for him. I'm just saying, objectively speaking, there's no reason for you that you should ever be spending on Duma. As for Veloria, Veloria is fairly decent. I don't think she's going to stay really strong for a long time, however. The main reason why I say this is the main thing that makes her very interesting to build is the fact that she's an infantry beast unit. Beast units, unlike dragons, do not have a weakness against anything, except picnic units. But Flora and Felicia are not exactly easily obtainable, let's just call it that. So beast effectiveness is not exactly a problem, and Poison Dagger, no one fucking runs this in 2K19, let's be honest. So, you know, as a result, she typically doesn't have much of a weakness. So, I guess that's a good thing, but the thing is, we'll obviously get more and more beast killers as time goes on. Hell, we'll probably get inheritable versions of those, because think about it this way, right? What the hell do you think Jill is going to come with? A beast killer? That's what I'm expecting. I'm expecting a bunch of characters to come with beast killers, at least from Path of Radiance. And it just makes sense, honestly. And at the end of the day, if you're going to be investing on Veloria purely on the fact that she doesn't have weakness right now, just think of like Legendary Tiki, Halloween Myrrh, how they had some weaknesses, but those units could not be really present. And then suddenly you just have Naga popping up, and suddenly just you get effectiveness against dragons on everything. Do you think that's not going to happen for beast units at one point? I expect it to happen. In fact, I would not be surprised. So, just do keep that in mind. So, if you do end up going for the plus 10, don't just push it because, ooh, beast unit right now have no weakness. It's not going to last. There's no way it's going to last. Right now, they have no weakness because they have to make the beast unit look good, considering how long it took and how long you had to wait. But I don't expect that to stay this way for a long time. So yeah, overall she's a decent unit. Her pref is not great, but her stat line is good because it's literally Iris stat line, so of course it's going to be good. It's Iris stat line with a bit more BST. What do you want me to say? It's always going to be good. Moving on to Levitain. Levitain is a fairly solid unit. Her HP is a bit low, like honestly a bit too low for my liking, but every other stat is fairly solid. Her speed is the main issue. If you can get speed plus on her, that actually pushes her speed to respectable amounts. Especially if you can get merges. But even on low merges, if you get speed plus and run speed plus 3 seal, you're already at 36 speed, and since she's a cav unit, she's easy to buff with own cav, that pushes you to 42 speed. Her defense is also fairly solid, allowing her to take some hits, and her res is, well, not great. That's honestly our main issues. If she has to deal with dragons, better hope to shit that you have Dazzling Staff also, and better hope that they're not infantries, because No See Disrupt is a bitch to deal with for her. Still, overall a fairly decent unit. So, as I said, overall, blue is the best color, red is the second best, colorless is the third best, and green is just skip that shit. Just avoid summoning green like the plague. Unless you really like those units, like character-wise, and you really want to pull them, it's generally not worth it otherwise. So, yeah. Other than this, I don't have much else to say about this banner. So, hopefully you learned quite a bit from this, or at least something. And, yeah. Have a nice one, everyone. I'll see you all in the comments.